Got a big crowd here today. Hello, everybody.
Ambassador China, McCallum.
Thank you. Okay. 大家下午好。我很高兴你们能来参加这个活动，你明白 ？Yes. Okay. 但是我的汉语还没有那么好，所以我说英语。
但是你进步很大呀。
So, for English people who didn't understand me and Chinese people who didn't understand my Chinese,
we understand.
What I just said is I'm glad you're all here, but my Chinese isn't still not very good, so I will speak English. But I'm very happy to see you all in my old territory of McCallum. I've now been ambassador almost 2 years, so it's happy to be back. And I want to talk to you about life in China as ambassador in two periods. The first period is before December 1st, which was the date Madame Meng was detained, and the second and more serious part is after December the 1st, when we clearly have a big issue between China and Canada. But I want to start on a happier note. Before this happened, and when relations between Canada and China were going extremely well. Just to give you one example, in the month of November alone, we had 6 ministers and 3 premiers visiting China, all in 1 month. You want me to use that? Okay. All in 1 month, and all making progress. We had the Prime Minister. Is it making an echo?
Yes.
Maybe I don't need it.
Yeah, you don't need it.
I think you can hear me, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So we had 6 ministers, 3 premiers. We had the Prime Minister in talks with Li Keqiang in Singapore in the same month, and things were all going very well. We were making progress in a number of dimensions, and I was certainly enjoying my life as ambassador, and I was still am having Chinese lessons 6 hours a week, but it's bu rong yi, not easy, but making some progress. And I might say my family made a good contribution to Chinese, to people ties. We have 3 sons, and the first son got married in July of 2017 to a Chinese woman. The second son got married in May of 2018 to a Chinese woman. And the third and final son, we only have 3, we're not going to have more, he got married in September of 2018, guess what, to a Chinese woman. So I think our family is doing our bit on the people-to-people front. So life in China was very good. And then on December the 1st, Madame Meng was detained in Vancouver. And so I want to explain to you that situation, and then I'm happy to take questions. Well, she was detained under the Canada-United States extradition treaty, and we have had that for many decades. And you know, under an extradition treaty, if one country asks for an individual to be detained, then we have to do it. And so it would have been the same whether it was US, China, or UK, Spain, or whatever 2 countries. Under the treaty, under the law, we are required to detain her. And then there will be a process unfolding, which I will describe in a moment. But then soon after that, there were 2 Canadians detained, and after that, there was 1 Canadian who had been sentenced to 15 years on drug charges, had a retrial, and was condemned to death. So the Canadian government and myself, we are asking that the Chinese government immediately release the 2 detained Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Fabrig, and we are asking that they not execute the 3rd Canadian. In terms of death penalty, Canada appeals for clemency anywhere in the world, because we oppose the death penalty on principle, whether it's in the United States, in China, or any other country. And in terms of the two Canadians, we believe they were arbitrarily detained, and we are seeking their release. And a number of other countries, a large number of other countries have joined Canada in seeking the release of these Canadians. And our argument is that it is not good for China if they are seen to detain individuals when one of their big companies has an issue internationally. It is not good for the image or the reputation of these companies, and therefore of China. And so we, in combination with other countries, are seeking the release of the two Canadians. In terms of Ms. Meng, she is now free on bail. She is living in her home in Vancouver, and she is likely to appear before a judge in early March. And at that point, she will be able to make her case. Well, actually, she will appear before the judge in early March. The actual trial will be somewhat later than that. We don't know the exact date. But I think she has quite good arguments on her side. One, political involvement by comments from Donald Trump in her case. Two, there's an extraterritorial aspect to her case. And three, there's the issue of Iran sanctions, which are involved in her case, and Canada does not sign on to these Iran sanctions. So I think she has some strong arguments that she can make before a judge, and then the judge will decide whether he or she thinks that she should be extradited or not. So all through this process, there's been zero involvement of the government of Canada. It's purely a judicial process. There may come a time when the Justice Minister is required to give a view, but that will not be for some months to come. So my point is that I know this has angered China, but we have a system of extradition treaty, a system of rules of law, which are above the government. The government cannot change these things. And as I said, I think Ms. Meng has quite a strong case. Indeed, the father of Ms. Meng, the founder of Huawei, has said publicly that he thinks that the justice system will give her a fair trial, and he has even said that the people that his daughter met when she was detained were kind to her. So this is how it is unfolding. And the last thing I would like to say before answering your questions is that right now, what I am saying to Canadians across the country is that the Canada-China relation should continue to move forward. I talked about the problems that we are having now, but I also talked about the great progress we had made before this issue came up. So my argument, and the argument of the government, is that we should continue to move forward with China, even though right now we are in the middle of a difficult time. So I have spoken to Canadian business people in Toronto, in Montreal, in China, and later this week in Vancouver, and almost all of them agree with me that we have invested a lot in China. Canadians have invested a lot in China. China has invested a lot in Canada. And now is not the time to cut short that investment. Now is the time to continue moving forward in the confidence that we will, at some point, solve this problem and move on. So I continue to be very pleased to be Canada's ambassador to China. I never expected that we would have this problem thrown at us. The government of Canada never expected that this would happen, but it did, and we have to deal with it, and we are dealing with it along the lines I just described, and I would be very happy at this point to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Ambassador, so according to your observation, why Chinese government this time responds so strongly, so fiercely?
I don't know why. I've asked that question. What I do know is that President Xi Jinping was very angry about this. And so others in the Chinese government have taken the lead from him. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe it is because Huawei is a national flagship company of China. And so it's not just any company, it's a special Chinese company. So maybe that is why he is so angry, or there may be other reasons that I don't know. But one thing I will say is, having been in China very recently, I don't think Chinese people are angry with Canadian people. I continue to fly the Canadian flag on my car when I drive around Beijing, no incident. And Canada Goose has just recently opened its store in Beijing, and they had to hire security guards. Do you know why? Not to guard them, not to protect them, but to help control the large crowds of people who were flocking into their stores to buy Canada Goose coats. So I don't think that, much as this has caused some anger in the parts of the government in China, my impression is that ordinary Chinese people still seem to get along fine with Canadian people, and I think that goes in both directions.
Mr. McCallum, can you describe to us, when the arrest first started, before it escalated into this diplomatic crisis, as an ambassador of Canada, can you describe to us, did you think you would be able to prevent this crisis as an ambassador using your personal relationship and abilities, your network in China? Would that be possible?
No. I mean, once Ms. Meng was arrested, the government of China was very angry with Canada. And I have a good relationship with members of the government of China. But this anger at the arrest of Ms. Meng was much more important than my relationships. I think my relationships are still positive, they will still help, but they were not sufficient to stop the Chinese anger at this situation, and we're still working to find a resolution.
So, Ambassador, U.S. already said they will send out the extradition request. Are there any plans for the Canadian government, to do anything, or what's the plan for ensure the release of the two Canadians?
Well, as I've said, the Canadian government is urging China to release the Canadians, and there are people from other countries who are doing the same. In terms of the Ms. Meng extradition request, that is up to the United States government to send that by a date quite soon. I think towards the end of this month they have to send it. I'm assuming they will. I don't know, but I'm assuming they will, because they initiated the request to extradite, so I'm sure they will send the supporting documents. And up until this point, the Canadian government has not really had any role. This has been handled by the judicial system and by officials. So we are waiting to see if this request comes. At that point, it will be studied by the Justice Department.
So, Mr. Ambassador.
Will you? Yes. And then you.
First. So, okay, Mr. Ambassador, so actually the Chinese ambassador in Canada recently gave a formal speech. One of the points he mentions about if Canada doesn't take the 5G technology from Huawei, and Canada needs to take the result. And someone here think it's kind of threat or sort of pressure from China, but the foreign ministry spokesman of China doesn't think so. So what's your comment and opinion about
Okay. Yeah, I know that story. I think I agree with what you just said. The Chinese ambassador said there would be consequences for Canada if we did not accept Huawei for 5G. And then the foreign ministry back in Beijing said no. And so you asked me, what do I think? Well, I do not know exactly what China would do. It seems the ambassador and the foreign ministry don't agree with each other, so it's hard for me to know what they would do. And I don't have anything with that to do with that decision. That is a decision the government will take, largely based on advice from their national security advisors. And so I do not know what it will be. I know that other members of what we call the Five Eyes: United States, Australia, UK, New Zealand, have said no to Huawei, or at least UK, one of their big companies has. So there's pressure on Canada to say no. But I do not know. I don't think a decision has yet been made. I believe the national security agencies are looking into it, and at some point a decision will be made, but that is not my decision.
So you think, well, the ambassador's speech is kind of a threat to Canada, or you don't think so?
Well, I think the ambassador was overruled by his head office. The ambassador said something, and then the head office, the foreign ministry, said no. So I believe the foreign ministry. But in any event, it's not my decision. It is a decision that will be made by the government of Canada in consultation with their security advisors.
And as a Chinese Canadian, or many Chinese Canadians, they show a big worry and concern about current circumstances between the two countries. I believe as a Chinese son-in-law, and also you know just mentioned your son married your three sons married three Chinese women, right?
Yeah.
So also as the father-in-law of your daughter-in-law, right? So what's your personal advice to the Chinese Canadian who, you know, under such kind of situation?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good question, because, as you said, well, my wife is Chinese, our three sons married Chinese women. I served as Member of Parliament for Markham for 17 years, and 40% of the voters of Markham are Chinese. So I have visited so far 20 of the 32 Chinese provinces. I'm in a race with the US ambassador to see who will visit them all first, and I'm winning so far. So I've come to see quite a lot of China, 20 provinces so far. I'm trying to learn the language, but it's not easy. So I have strong connections with China. And I was sent to China by Prime Minister Trudeau to strengthen the relationship between the two countries. The government of Canada wants stronger ties with China, and it's partly for that reason that they sent me to be their ambassador to help strengthen those ties. So I still want those ties to be strengthened. I am sorry that this incident, this difficult incident, arose. It was a total surprise for everybody in Canada, but it happened and we have to deal with it. So I am hopeful that we will be able to find a solution in the not too distant future, and that we will then continue to build those strong ties. And I hope even in the meanwhile, as I said, even before we get a resolution, that Chinese Canadians and other Canadians and Chinese people will continue to strengthen those ties, because this is a hiccup along the road. It's not a small hiccup, it's a big hiccup, but it's a hiccup, and we will eventually solve it and move forward. And so I think most Chinese Canadians, most of the people, Chinese Canadians who voted for me, I think would agree that we want to move forward with stronger ties with China, and we want to find a way to resolve this difficult problem. That is certainly my hope.
Could we limit to one question per media?
Sorry,
all right, please.
First of all, I want to verify that you just mentioned Ms. Meng will be in front of the judge in the early March. Is that early February?
Well, my understanding is that there is a hearing in early February, which has more to do with her bail conditions, and then there will be another hearing in early March, which is the first hearing that has specifically to do with the extradition case. And then at that hearing in early March, they will have to find a time later on when the full hearing will take place, and that will depend on the availability of court time. So that might not be until 2, 3, 4 months later. We do not know the exact time. So the real hearing before the judge will probably not happen for several months, and we do not know the precise date.
You mean the real hearing for the extradition?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
The hearing in early February is not about extradition, it's about the bail terms. And then the hearing in early March is to launch the case, but the real case will not be held for some time after that.
And today, the spokesperson for Chinese government, Hua Chunying, she said Canada and the U.S. abused the extradition treaty by arresting Ms. Meng. So how do you respond?
Well, look, Canada has had decades and decades of history with China. I think we have a very strong relationship with China, starting from Norman Bethune, if not before. But there are some occasions when we don't agree with China. And then, you know, all friends have disagreements sometimes. And when we disagree with China, we state our view, they state their view. And this is one area where we disagree. The Canadian view is we have an extradition treaty with the United States. We have had this extradition treaty for decades. We have extradition treaties with many other countries. And we are obliged under the law to obey the terms of those extradition treaties. Now, I cannot speak for the motives of the United States. You'd have to ask Donald Trump or someone in the U.S. government. But we received, the Justice Department of Canada received a request from the Justice Department of the United States saying they had charges against this person and they wanted Canada to extradite her. And so under the extradition treaty, we have to take that request seriously. It doesn't mean we will extradite her, but it means we have to detain her and have a hearing. And so that is what we are doing. And we have no choice under our law but to do that. Now, the Chinese government may have a different view, and they have a right to their view. But I am just telling you what our view is, and it's something according to our law, according to our basic democratic system, which has a division of labor between the courts and the parliament, and one cannot interfere in the territory of the other. And that is how Canada has always worked. That is how it is working now. And even though this is a very serious situation, even though the Canada-China relation is very important to the government, very important to me, very important to many in this room, we cannot override our basic system of law just when we feel like it.
So, Ambassador, yeah, you're expecting and hoping the resolution to be made. What kind of the resolution be? Be the like Canada release Meng and China release the 3 Canadians. So, what's your expectation?
Well, my hope is that that will be the outcome, but it is not something that I necessarily control. It's not something even the government necessarily controls. Mm-hmm. But there are basically 3 options. Okay. 1, she is deported. She is extradited. That would not be a happy outcome, and that would take years before it happened because she would have the right to appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada. But I'm just talking options. I'm not saying what's good and what's bad. So the first option would be that she was extradited. The second option would be that the United States made some kind of a deal with China, and part of the deal would be that they would no longer seek her extradition. And we would hope if the U.S. made such a deal, part of the deal would also be to release the 2 Canadians. So that is an option, but that is more under the control of the United States than it is under the control of Canada. And the third option, which we've been discussing, is that she could be released by a Canadian court. And that would be up to the judge, and her hearing will occur in several months. So I think those are the 3 options, and I would certainly be hopeful that we could get a resolution in the not too distant future, but it is not something that either I or the government of Canada has full control over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ambassador, my name is Bobby from Chinese Canadian Times. So I have questions about your job more about your job field. So I heard in China there's some Chinese visa applicants to Canada. So they're complaining about, seems like the visa application to Canada is kind of tightened from the Canadian government, and also because they're worried about the Chinese New Year is approaching, and they want to get the visa, and then the holiday is coming as well. And then secondly, is that both countries have issued travel alert, and is it safe, like for Canadian or Chinese Canadian to travel to China?
On the first question,
Yeah.
I used to be immigration minister, so I know something about visas, and I think we accept something like over 90% of the visa applications from Chinese people. Mm-hmm. That's a lot higher than certain other countries. Mm-hmm. And so I have not heard of any change in that policy. And the second question, we have issued a change in the travel advisory, which refers to the danger of the arbitrary application of certain laws, but we have not changed the overall alert level. So we are not saying to Canadians, don't go to China. We are saying each person takes the decision for himself or herself. If you've had a history of troubles with Chinese law, it's probably not a good idea to go. But if you're an ordinary person, as a tourist or as a business person, then I don't see a reason for you not to go. In fact, when I say let's keep moving forward with China, that implies that some Chinese people come to Canada and that some Canadian people go to China. So I am hopeful that the two-way flow of people will continue. And so we are certainly not saying don't go to China, but we are saying be careful, look at your own situation before you decide.
Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, so what we have at the moment is that we're trying to keep the conversation going. We're trying to talk to the Chinese government. We're trying to talk to the Chinese authorities on how to solve the situation. But the problem is, it's already been almost 2 months, and we don't see any signs of the Chinese government backing down on their positions. And we don't see any signs of two detained Canadians being released. So what if the things that we are doing are not working? Like, what is the government plan after that? Is there another option, or is there a tougher measure that we may or may not do to the Chinese?
I think I've described the options just now. And the third option, where we eventually release her, where a judge releases her, that's not going to happen for a few months because it won't be in the court for that time. So we have to be patient. We have to wait a few months to see how things unfold. And we will continue to make our representations to China. Our friends in other countries will make their representations to China, and we will be hoping that that will have some results. No doubt the Chinese will also be continuing to make their representations. But I think we need to have a little bit of patience in this matter. I'm hoping it can be resolved as quickly as possible, but I know that we're talking a number of months before it comes to a judge, and so it's not going to be resolved tomorrow.
Mr. McCallum, you mentioned before that it's not time for Mr. Trudeau to talk to the Chinese president yet. So can you give us an idea, like what would be the right time for him to have that conversation?
Well, I said it was not the right time for him to talk to Mr. Xi Jinping at this time. I think at some time, yes. But that is kind of what I call the last arrow in our quiver. That is our last resort. And you don't want to use the last resort, the last weapon you have, until you are well prepared. And so we have other people talking to the Chinese government. We have myself and others. We have other countries making representations. So I think there will come a time when it will be the right time for Mr. Trudeau to talk to Xi Jinping, but I do not think that time has come yet. I think we need to make more preparations for that event.
Did you meet President Xi? Did you meet President Xi, or what's your plan to?
I have met President Xi, not on this issue. I have not seen President Xi since this issue arose. But I met President Xi when I presented my credentials as ambassador. I met President Xi on the visit with former Governor General David Johnston. I met him on the visit with Prime Minister Trudeau. I've seen him in the Great Hall of the People. So I have interacted with him a little bit, but you know, not every day, but I have met him once or twice, yes.
Have you planned to meet him about this situation?
I think the issue was whether the Prime Minister should call Xi Jinping, not whether the ambassador should talk to Xi Jinping. If he wanted to talk to me, I would say yes, but I haven't received that invitation. At that level, it's more likely that he would want to talk to the Prime Minister than to the ambassador.
Mr. McCallum, according to some media report, if Canada receives a formal request from U.S., the Minister of Justice of Canada has 30 days to issue approval to proceed. So do you think, is there any chance to present the arguments at this stage?
I think Ms. Menn's lawyers may present that argument. But in terms of the authority to proceed, this is a fairly standard thing that is normally just handled by the officials, not by the minister. So it's a fairly simple process. So I am not sure whether there would be much chance that they would not proceed. I think it's a fairly standard process. But Ms. Menn's lawyers, if they wish, could make representations at that time.
Did you see any abnormality or any protesting activities outside Canadian embassy in Beijing?
Very, very little. I think there were 3 very small gatherings of maybe 15 or 20 people. I think one in Hong Kong, one perhaps in Beijing, but very minor. As I said, I don't see signs of hostility between Chinese people and Canadian people. At the beginning, there was a big upsurge in social media comment directed against Canada, but that quietened down, and no demonstrations at all recently. So, and as I said, all these Chinese people are buying Canada Goose coats, and so I don't detect any hostility personally, or the people I know. There were those very small demonstrations in the past, but I don't believe recently.
Thank you.
Ambassador, some critics say that why don't just PM call President Xi, and probably it's an easier way to solve the problem. What's your idea?
Well, I just answered that question, and I think that the time will come, but this is the last resort, and I think there has to be more preparatory work done with calls and interventions at other levels before we get to the top level.
Thank you for asking the question. I think just a few more minutes.
Relationship now.
I think it depends on the level. When my first meeting, when this happened with the official Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, was very hostile. He was very hostile. But it's calmed down. And recently I've had meetings and it's much more pleasant. And our interactions with Chinese companies, certain levels of Chinese government have been quite friendly. In many areas, business goes on. We've had delegations of forest companies and others who have come to China, been well received. I just spoke to Mayor John Tory today, and the mayor of Chongqing still plans to visit Canada. I've spoken to leading Canadian business people. They are still planning to make their trips to China. So I think life goes on, business goes on. To some extent, in some areas, less than normal because of this, but it certainly hasn't been a total standstill. I think by and large life goes on. But for example, if you're a university president from Canada and you're coming to China, you might at this juncture see a vice president and not a president. So that's it's not stopped, but it's impeded to a degree. And so I think that's how it is now. And one thing I am trying to do as ambassador is to encourage people not to stop, to continue doing whatever they're doing, business, travel, pleasure, tourism, with studying with Chinese and vice versa, so as to keep the relationship growing and solid as much as possible.
So the first one you talk with, who is the first one you talk with? You said that the first one is very...
oh, it was one of the vice ministers. I don't want to mention his name because maybe he's very friendly now.
Is it hard to explain the situation in Canada is like stuck in between a rock and a hard place?
You could say that. Which is the rock and which is the hard place? Is China the rock or China the hard place?
That's the English media call it.
Well, certainly Canada, through no choice of our own, is stuck in a dispute between the United States and China. The biggest economy in the world, the second biggest economy in the world, and we are in the middle. And we didn't ask to be there, it just happened. And we have to obey our own laws and follow the process. But it's not that we asked for this. We'd be much happier if this had never happened. But it did happen, and we have to deal with it. And in part, it is a result of ongoing tensions between China and the United States. Or it may be. You know, the situation will evolve more fully as time goes by. But certainly there are some challenges between the United States and China on trade, and so we are in a sense caught in the middle of that, but we are working with many countries, including the United States, to try to find a resolution. And we are certainly talking to many people in China as well in order to try to find a resolution that will be satisfactory for all parties.
So you come back for vacation or to see us?
Well, actually it's funny, or I don't know if it's funny, but I was going to come back for Christmas and New Year's, but then I stayed in China because of this emergency, and so my wife came before me. And so I came much later. So my wife went back to China yesterday, and I'm staying until Saturday. So usually I'm going to Vancouver tomorrow, and then to China. Usually my wife stays for longer than me, because my departure was delayed. This time I'm longer than her. So I had some vacation, but I would say it was almost entirely work on this challenge to our situation. And I saw my family and my new grandchild. My new grandchild, by the way, I don't think I have very powerful genes because my new grandchild is a girl, and she's 3/4 Chinese because her father is half Chinese, my son, and her mother is all Chinese. And so she's a beautiful little girl, but you know what? To me, she looks all Chinese. So I don't think my genes have come out very strongly. But I did see her, as well as my sons and my daughters-in-law, over the last few days. And
so
I will.
The three girls are from Beijing?
No. One is, it's what you might call a balanced portfolio of Chinese women. They're all Chinese Canadians. But one of them is originally from Anhui province, Anqing. And we went there with my son and his wife, my daughter-in-law, to celebrate her wedding in Anqing in Anhui province. But the second one is her family is originally from Hong Kong. And the third one, her family is originally from Malaysia, like my wife. So they're all Chinese, but they're from Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Hubei province. Okay?
So we hope that you can bring happy ending when you are back to China.
I certainly am hoping for a happy ending as quickly as can possibly be achieved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.